Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. This evening's edition will host Legislative Issues with Jim Parisi, where we bring the legislature into your living room. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
Joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly and their issues right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field representative with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. This week and this month, we've been talking about a number of different issues that are appearing on the November ballot here in Rhode Island. And today we're talking about the one issue that the labor movement does not support, and that is question number 3. Joining us today is Mike Araujo. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. A chance to talk about question 3 is an opportunity I'm never going to miss.
That is terrific. And I was in attendance when the coalition that was opposing the question had their press conference at the old State House,
right.
and you spoke. What was on your mind at that time? Why were you concerned about whether or not Rhode Island has a constitutional convention?
A right taken away is a much harder thing to come back, and one that takes so much effort that it would be devastating to the long-term health of the state and indeed the way our democracy functions. I mean, we would have to redo our concepts of democracy if this goes through. We would have to go back to a way where we're organizing for our basic freedoms one more time, and I don't know that we're all prepared for that right now. I'd rather avoid the issue.
And there's a group of people that have come together, coalesced together, to urge people to reject number 3.
Absolutely.
The Citizens for Responsible Government is the name of the coalition, but reject number 3 is, reject question 3 is the theme that they're...
Right, reject number 3. It's again, and this was pointed, I believe you actually pointed this out, that in description, the Constitutional Convention is an easy sell because it's a short, catchy explanation, and one that serves the purpose of people who depend on ignorance for voting. Our position of rejecting number 3 is a much more nuanced and complicated position, like a democracy should be, where you have many interests, each one acting in their own accord, thinking about the larger body, but it's nuanced. You have to make room for people, and you have to make room for compromise. Rejecting 3 allows that room. Allowing 3 to pass, if it should pass, would circumvent our ability to interact with each other directly and to interact with our legislators in the proper way, the way that we always have. Besides the fact that the state is not in its financially strongest position right now. And a constitutional convention is horrendously expensive and one that we really cannot afford to undertake.
Yeah, there was a recent bipartisan commission that came up with a report, and they estimate it's going to be millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
And that's just to run the convention. What about running candidates and
right.
lobbying, and how much PR is going to be behind ballot questions?
Hugely wasted resource in a state that has so few resources. It's an inexcusable expense when schools are cutting programs that are so vital to children, where municipalities are foregoing raises for their employees who have patiently and honorably held back for the past couple of years in acknowledgement of how hard the times have been. For us to spend that kind of money right now is to sacrifice the future of our children on the altar of some pretext of democracy. And this is not what we do as Democrats, and it's not what we do as citizens of Rhode Island. We look to the future. This Constitutional Convention can be nothing but a rearward-looking, backwards direction. And it's one that I fear, and one that I believe that everyone should remember. Vote no on 3 on this issue, by all means.
We saw spending of over $10 million in our gubernatorial campaign for the primary. That's not the general election, and that was just on the Democratic primary, another couple million on the Republican primary. Do you think that big money would come in from out of state if we did have a constitutional convention?
If I were big money, I would not resist this state at all. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity to gain a foothold in a relatively progressive region and test policies out that you've tested in other parts of the country. If I were the Koch brothers or the Heritage Foundation or one of these organizations that tends not to believe in full equality for women or tends not to believe in concepts of workers' self-management or collective bargaining or tends not to believe in the rights of minorities, I would test. This would be the perfect testing ground. In what is supposedly the liberal Northeast, you could gain a serious foothold with very little expense, and because of the lack of limits of spending on the Constitutional Convention, there's really no upper limit to how much money potentially could be spent. And let me tell you right now is that the people on the side for women's rights, for minority rights, for immigrants' rights, do not have a lot of money. The money that they have is spent towards servicing those constituencies. And they tend to do it. I mean, NARAL has been beleaguered for years by constant and consistent attacks on a woman's right to choice. The immigrant community finds itself endlessly fighting legal battles. They do not have time or the resource to do a full campaign against the Constitutional Convention, and those would be the people that suffered immediately. You would see the dollar of a wealthy reactionary go much further in Rhode Island than you would see it in California or Texas or Kansas, for that matter. We have a small state, an easily reached public, and an easily, I'm not going to say fooled, but a busy public who don't have all the time in the world to devote to all these different narrow issues that a constitutional convention could come up with. The shortest and smartest thing to do for Rhode Island is to say no. Is to simply say no to number 3, that we're going to draw the line and say that there can be no outside money or interest. We do not believe that our democracy is served by the poisoning influence of money. We do not agree with the fact that so much money was spent on a gubernatorial campaign when so little of it is used in Rhode Island. This is not how we're going to live in Rhode Island, and I believe we could do better.
You mentioned immigrant rights, and what comes to my mind, just the past couple of years, through the leadership of our current Governor Chafee, immigrant children had the right to pay state tuition if they attended a state institution, irregardless of their immigration status. I can easily imagine an issue like that being fodder of a constitutional convention.
Absolutely. I mean, what quieter or easier group of people to go after than the children of immigrants, especially ones that are just trying to go to school and literally make this state a better state. They don't have time to fight editorials, and they don't have time to fight attacks. And we saw a very ugly wave of nativism and jingoism when Governor Chafee did sign that. It was a positive step, and one that can only grow the state, to allow immigrant children who are able to get into our schools to exceed. The intellectual life of the state is served by having a diversity of views. Our democracy is served by having those people here. And that's the thing we should be looking towards. It's a forward-looking, it was a visionary move on his part, and one that should be applauded, but one that is under serious jeopardy by a constitutional convention. It is so easy to go after the quietest and the weakest among us. They don't have a lot of legislators backing them up. They don't have lots of lawyers. They're not people who can defend themselves. And this fight would be against the defenseless, and one that I do not agree with. So again, I'll say it one more time. Vote no on 3.
The coalition that you had described at the beginning of the show is broad. You touched on issues of immigrant rights and worker rights and civil rights and women's reproductive rights, and all those issues are represented in the coalition that's working to urge people to vote no on 3.
So there's room in the coalition for more, and it would be interesting to see how that plays out, because that's how a democracy is supposed to work, is you bring in these divergent views and you allow them to meet and actually discuss things and hash it out, and that's what a coalition does, and that's that's why it's attractive. More. We need more in the coalition.
Perhaps this coalition of strange bedfellows will coalesce and convince voters to vote no on 3 in November.
I hope so. It would be a terrible thing for this device.
Michael, thank you very much for your time and your insight on this issue. We're going to concentrate on one specific bond issue. It's bond issue number 7, question 7. And I'm pleased to have two new guests to our show. Jeremy Goodman with the Roger Williams Park Zoo. Thank you for joining us, Jeremy.
My pleasure.
And Bob Seguino with the Rhode Island Clean Water Finance Agency.
That's Bill, and that's correct.
So, gentlemen, before we talk about the bond issue itself, it's always good to get a little bit of background. Jeremy, how long have you been with the zoo?
I moved up to Rhode Island to take the position of executive director at the zoo a little over a year ago, last summer, and it's been a great move. My family and I, we love Rhode Island, and the zoo is one of the historic zoos in the country, and it's a phenomenal place, so we're really excited about things.
And before you were working at Roger Williams Park Zoo, what were you doing?
I was the director of a zoo in New Jersey, and similar size, a little smaller, but you know, we did great things there, turned that zoo around, and it was really an economic engine for the community and for the state, so expect to do the same thing here in Rhode Island.
Terrific. Bill, there's probably not too many viewers who know what your agency is, let alone what your agency does. Why don't you give our viewers a 2-minute introduction into your agency and what role you play in our state's natural resources?
Sure. I'm the executive director for the Rhode Island Clean Water Finance Agency, and we're probably one of 48 similar agencies across the country. There's usually one in every state. And we administer the state revolving loan fund for clean water and drinking water. And the legislature also gave us roads and bridges in 2013. So in terms of what we do is we get a capitalization grant from the federal government. It's matched by funds similar to what we have coming up in the bond issue by 20% with the state. And we turn around and we issue short-term, not short-term, but long-term notes to cities and towns to borrow for sewer improvements. And some do sewer. We have a separate revolving fund for water. And just recently, as I said, we have a small revolving fund for roads and bridges. And in our 25-year history, which is 25 this year, we have lent out somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.1 billion for clean water projects, similar to what we're talking about on this bond issue, and about $350 million in drinking water projects. So, and we're AAA rated, probably the only one in the state, and that goes a long way when we try to sell bonds.
Another good point to emphasize in this great state of Rhode Island. Before you were with the agency, what did you do, Bill?
In my previous life, I was town manager of East Greenwich. I was manager there for 25 years. Generally, my career has been as a manager. I graduated from URI and have done similar jobs in North Carolina, Kentucky, Massachusetts, and came home to roost. And as Jeremy says, we all miss Rhode Island. So we came home 25 years ago.
Sure. So we've had a couple of guests on this show talking about a couple of different bond issues. We had Scott Duhamel on the show with the Building and Construction Trades Council talking about 1 and 2, which deals with gambling, the transportation hub, URI, and he also mentioned and talked about question 7. And we also had Paul Harrington, Fuzzy Harrington, with the TransUnion talking about the transportation hub. But your bond issue, question 7, is an amalgamation of a couple of different projects. And I think our viewers would really benefit from knowing some of the details, you know, what will be funded by the state if voters vote yes on 7. Jeremy, why don't I start with you? What is in it for the zoo and the people who love the zoo, as well as people who love Roger Williams Park if they vote yes on 7?
Sure. You know, directly for the zoo, what the public will see are brand new exhibits, a brand new education center. We do a lot of education over at the zoo, and our current facility is not keeping up with the demand. You know, we educate over 140,000 kids every year. We go over 800 schools, and so a new education center is very critical. But besides the brand new exhibits, a new rainforest building, reptile house, really this is about economic development, and this money bring jobs to Rhode Island, construction jobs, direct jobs, induced jobs, as well as bring tourism to the state. All these new exhibits will attract significant tourism. The average new exhibit will bring approximately 15% increase in attendance, and based off of our out-of-state numbers, over the course of 4 years, that's about 54,000 people coming into Rhode Island, spending their money, not only at the zoo, but at our shops, at our restaurants, and in our communities. So really, what the public will see is brand new, wonderful exhibits that they can come and enjoy, new education center, but deeper down, it really is about helping stimulate the economy and bring jobs to Rhode Island and tourism to Rhode Island.
I know any type of attraction like a zoo, you have to always be current. You always need new things to attract, old visitors as well as garner some new visitors. So you have a home for reptiles now. Why don't you let our viewers know what's in store with the new construction should it be approved?
Sure. We don't actually have a reptile house. There isn't a single one in all of New England. So we would be really the first one. So it'd be quite the attraction that would draw people from all around. Our rainforest building is currently built in 1929, and it's really seen better days, and it's kind of a dark, very concrete building. We're looking at building something bright and airy full of live plants and animals, monkeys, birds, amphibians, all sorts of strange, unique, and rare creatures. So we're really looking at delivering the most up-to-date current exhibits. Roger Williams Park Zoo is one of the oldest zoos in the country. It's probably about the third oldest. It depends on your zoo history. It's somewhere between 3 and 5, but it's been around a long time, and that has challenges. Obviously, we have a lot of older infrastructure, and this money will be put towards updating things as well as adding new and exciting exhibits.
Will some buildings come down to make room for new construction? And what does the transition look like for people who visit the zoo?
Sure. One building will come down. The old Tropics building, it's getting ready to come down on its own, so that's one of the reasons it's desperately needed. So people will see over time, we'll be designing all the new projects over the next year, and we'll be in the ground, ready for construction, assuming everyone votes yes on 7 and we get it passed, we'll be in the ground for construction for 2016.
And finally, before we turn our attention to some of the other projects, the education programs. Could you give our viewers a sense on what kind of education programs you offer, and what new and different things will you be able to do with a new facility dedicated to education?
So we have an incredible education department, some of the best educators, environmental educators in the state, if not the country. And right now we operate out of a small circular building that divides with a couple of wall dividers into 3 pie wedges, but not very good sound restriction, inhibition in the classrooms. So the new building should have, we're hoping, 6 new classrooms, and just really be a great place for kids and adults to learn. Our education programs span from toddlers and infants all the way up through adults. We have adult wine and cheese education lectures, but we also have very hands-on mommy and me type programs, and great teen programs where we're really inspiring the next generation of conservationists and environmentalists.
Terrific. Well, thank you for that. Bill, let's talk about the other aspects of Question 7. So what amount of money will be in play that would benefit Rhode Island should 7 be approved related to your agency?
Well, related to the agency, we are listed in the bond issue for $20 million. And the $20 million is there primarily to increase our capacity. Our lending capacity on an annual basis is somewhere between $80 and $90 million a year for clean water projects, for which this bond issue, as you know, starts out with clean water. And one of our biggest borrowers, the Narragansett Bay Commission, as you know, built a combined sewer overflow tunnel in the City of Providence, and that was a huge success. That was probably a $500 million project. We probably loaned close to 50% of that, and they still have another tunnel to build. Not Warren, but Warwick, if you've read in the paper, has recently voted to expand their sewer system, so we're doing that. Probably one of the more visible projects that we've funded, you can see when you're on 95, if you remember, the Warwick sewage treatment plant was underwater during 2010, and there's a berm that goes around that plant. Together with FEMA and a $7 million loan from the agency, they're raising the berm around the sewage treatment plant so it won't flood again. So we're kind of proud of those projects. Some of that $20 million we get, because of the way we borrow money and lend money, we're able to put $3 to $4 on the street for every dollar we get over time, because we do a direct loan, and then as the payments come back, we can issue bonds to further increase the pot in the revolving fund, and we would do that. Some of the things you may be interested in that some of our requirements is we require everybody to have a single audit, which the federal government requires us to do that. But all the funds that we administer, Davis-Bacon applies, prevailing wage applies, Buy American and Steel applies. So it's a pretty local issue, and I think the way the EPA has set it up, it's an issue that affects everybody. We estimate, together with DEM, who's also in the bond issue, that for every $1 million we put on the street, that's probably 5 jobs that we create. So when you take a look at what we've done over the past, that $1.1 billion, we've added a lot to the economy in terms of how we've borrowed money and what have you. And the return that we have gotten, that $1.1 billion, comes from about $250 million in EPA grants and $45 million in state matching grants. So we've turned that money around very well, and we look to do it again. I haven't been here for the other 24 years of the agency, but in my first year here, we've done quite well getting money out on the street.
I know we've had in this studio Scott Duhamel, Mike Sabatoni, and others talking about the unemployment rate in building and construction trades and how hungry their members are for work. Once the money is available, will there be a fairly quick turnaround between voter approval and getting money out there and construction going?
I think it'll take us probably a year to get the money that we're talking about right now, but that we will have an $80 million bond issue going out on the street probably after the first of the year, which will contribute to some of those projects. As I said, if our capacity would meet our demand, then we'll kick in the $20 million and make it go a little bit further.
Sure. Are there any specific projects that you've earmarked for this bond issuance, or is it really just a necessary flow of money to keep a variety of different projects going on in our state?
That's it, exactly. We don't have it earmarked for anyone other than I've indicated that we know Narragansett Bay is coming in, we know Warwick is coming in. This $20 million will increase our lending capacity so that all the other communities and these other agencies can, hopefully we'll be able to fund them and meet their demand with our capacity.
And should voters approve, question 7, $20 million bond authority for your agency, and it's dedicated for
Clean
both
water.
Clean water.
Not drinking water, but clean water. A little misnomer there, but clean water.
Terrific. I know in addition to the $15 million for the zoo, there's also $3 million in this bond issue dedicated for the park itself. Your zoo is located in the park. What would we see happening in Roger Williams Park should the voters say yes on 7?
Sure, Roger Williams Park is really a state treasure, and just like the zoo is, and the money is really going to be towards restoring some of the infrastructure, some of the roadways that have seen better days, and some of the bridge work, things along those lines. So things that people use every day, going in and out through the park. It'll really, once again, be putting people to work, getting all those jobs done, all the paving jobs and all the construction jobs. But something that everybody that goes through the park will directly benefit for.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of question 7. Not only does it benefit the community at large by maintaining and improving our amenities, but it also will put people to work, which is so important when we're sitting here as the state with the 3rd highest unemployment in the country.
Absolutely, and the bond. I mean, obviously, from a clean water standpoint, everybody needs clean water. I mean, most of Rhode Island's economy, really does revolve around clean water. We are the ocean state, and whether it's sailing, fishing, going to the beach, that's all part of tourism, and it really does. Even though it's good for the environment, it's also great for the economy. So it really is a great win-win situation for everybody.
I haven't heard many detractors. I haven't heard any detractors about Question 7. If you just have a minute to talk to people, Bill, what do you tell people why any voter who's probably paying more attention, if they're paying attention at all, to the election of candidates than they are bond issues? How do you really focus people on Question 7?
Well, when I run into them, probably two things I'd like to say is one is look at how clean Narragansett Bay is from what it once was, and that's a direct result of clean water projects that we're talking about being implemented. We've become the finance agency for those projects. We've loaned money upstream, we've loaned money downstream, and I think the Bay is, as Jeremy said, is a great tourist attraction. We don't loan money for economic development purposes, but we clean the environment, and I'm sure there's a direct correlation there someplace that people would want to keep a clean environment and a clean bay.
Yeah. Jeremy, I imagine the zoo itself is a lot more tangible. So many people have seen it; they know full well, what they're getting when they approve the bond. Are you seeing good support amongst your patrons and supporters of the zoo about getting people educated and informed about the value of Question 7?
We are. As a matter of fact, we've been promoting it in a very unusual way. We have our Jack-o'-lantern spectacular going on now, and we have a whole Vote Yes on 7 pumpkin display. So we're getting the word out, and people love the zoo. We're the #1 tourist attraction and single family tourist attraction in the state with over 650,000 visitors. So, we are, even though we're located in Providence, we are really a state asset, and everybody has stories about going to the zoo when they were kids, bringing their kids now, bringing their grandkids, and the zoo just has a special place in everybody's heart, and we've gotten a lot of support, but, it's really the votes that count, so we're just making sure we encourage everyone to get out there and vote yes on 7.
Sure. And just so our viewers have a sense, I mean, these are bonds that are backed by the state. The voters are given a choice of voting yes or no, and it's really whether or not voters want to see these projects move forward. Whether or not they want to see the zoo facilities enhanced, or clean water projects by municipalities funded, or brownfields remediation, which is another aspect of Question 7, or money dedicated to preserving farmland, which is yet another aspect of 7 that we haven't really talked about. Those are the choices that voters are making when they are voting on 7.
No, that's correct, and you did 2 out of several of them. I was going to do that before it ended.
Please go right ahead. So.
Janet Coit, the director of DEM, isn't with us today, but she makes up the other agency that is a beneficiary of the $53 million. I believe her agency is in for 15, and as you said, brownfields projects, remediation, the stormwater projects that are also in there, recreation grants for cities and towns, going back to my other life, and farmland preservation. So that when you put that together, it really is a healthy communities bond issue, from the park to the zoo to clean water, and to cleaning up some of the other items that we all would like to see corrected. And DEM has been a good partner, and Janet Coit and the department has done well.
Terrific. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the show, educating our viewers about the value of voting yes on Question 7. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field representative with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. This week and this month, we are talking about issues that are appearing on the November ballot. And this evening, we're going to concentrate on some issues related to the building and construction trades. So we have with us the Secretary-Treasurer of the Building and Construction Trades, Scott Duhamel. Scott, thanks for joining us this evening.
Hi, Jim. Thank you.
On our previous show, we talked about questions 6 and 7, the transportation hub bond issue and then the open space bond issue, which is question number 7. Why don't we work our way backwards a little more and talk about the bond issue number 5 on the November ballot. What can you tell our viewers about November 5 and why should they support it?
Okay, well, I have a unique point of view as I sit on the Rhode Island State Council of the Arts. This is an arts capitalization bill, $35 million spread across a variety of arts facilities, from opera houses to the Philharmonic to even Trinity. And as we all know, they are as important as they are for the state, for the children of our state, for those of us who seek entertainment. They also tourism, I think, very important for tourism and for the attractiveness of our state to always continually improve these facilities. They're tough to keep up. They cost a lot of money. You know, many have been around for a long time. They get outmoded in certain ways with new technology, et cetera. So this would hit a variety of arts facilities, $35 million substantial, which would be a number of small jobs amounting to 30%. So of course, construction-wise, once again, this will be prevailing wage, which allows the people we represent a fair chance at getting to work there. And I also think it's really important for arts facilities to always be upgraded and improved. And we have a highly regarded arts community in Rhode Island. For a small state, we're often talked about as a place who sits neatly between New York and Boston, yet almost holds its own as far as the arts go. Many people who come here to go to school here don't leave and end up in our arts community. And there's you know, we really have a well-loved and well-liked, and we attract many people to come see the variety of arts in Rhode Island. Very proud of the arts in Rhode Island.
Are these projects located throughout the state?
Throughout the state, from Westerly to Bristol or whatever. So they're throughout the state. I'm sorry I can't be more specific, but I haven't quite memorized them all yet.
And the bond issue is $35 million?
$35 million, yes.
Okay. And do you have a sense on how it works? Because these bond issues, this is the state borrowing money. Are they going to then assist all these different arts organizations in their own construction projects?
Yes, they've had specific ask from each one, so that's already on the table. These will directly go to where they're already pointed towards. So the best thing about this one, you'll have all those arts facilities, hopefully with the people that follow them and their subscribers, et cetera, all fighting to get this one passed.
And this money is dedicated not to operating a theater or in a company. It's about the facilities themselves.
No, and it's funny you say that, but we have had some problems in this state about the operation of theater as far as utilizing union help. And you know, one of the pledges we've made, those of us who are working for this, is that perhaps we can get some dialogue going in some of the facilities that we think ought to look at utilizing, you know, particularly IATSE, the stagehands union, who is flourishing right now, and it looks like it's ready to get bigger and better. And I would hope that perhaps with our help, maybe we'll help the dialogue grow, so maybe we can change some things in some of those houses.
Yeah, that would be important in moving things forward about the people who work in these facilities. That is for certain.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So the variety of projects that are part of question number 5 must attract a variety of supporters, similar to what we talked about last time about the variety of supporters on open space bond and transportation bond. Here we have theaters, we have music companies, we have an orchestra involved, all who have a piece of this.
And of course, it directly goes to any of those individual towns or cities where these facilities are, to the merchants, the restaurateurs, the bar owners, et cetera. They all benefit from more business at any arts facility. So they will be an important part of the coalition, I think.
Is your Arts Council spearheading
Yes,
the
they are.
support for this
Arts
bond?
Council has been, led the legislative drive, or helped lead the legislative drive to get this bond issue on the ballot, and they're going to be, they are spearheading the rest of the drive to get it passed.
Okay, and again, it's question 5.
Question
You're
5.
urging people to vote yes on
Yes,
question 5?
yes on question 5.
And it's on the November ballot?
Yes.
Okay. Another question on the ballot as we move our way backwards is question 4. Now, this is a significant in terms of size of the bond that's dedicated to higher education. Why don't you tell our viewers about question 4?
Question 4 is particularly exciting for me because it's a very large construction project, $125 million URI School of Engineering. We all know that this will be a long-lasting project with a lot of construction workers, but as someone who went to URI, we all know the engineering school, even when I was back there in the 70s, was always known that someone who went to the engineering school would actually get a job. And it's always been a place that produced real jobs. And it has a good reputation, but the facilities are woefully behind. And no one could deny that. This is a chance for URI to jump into the future and have a facility that represents the education that they're presenting down there. I think this, among the many coalitions supporting this, higher education, URI alum, etc., are many of the engineering firms in New England. They believe that this is essential. Just as, we've had the School of Pharmacy, the School of Chemistry, both recently been, new buildings, redone, up to date with all the new technology. This is probably, could be the biggest, well, it will certainly be the biggest project numerically, but I also think for a school that's always been successful, we've had a lot of proud graduates of that school go on to bigger and better things. I think it's almost essential for the next step to keep that School of Engineering flourishing.
I'm not down on campus a lot. I was just down last week. I know URI looks different than it did just 10 years ago in terms of its construction projects. What can you tell us about what the facility is going to look like, or people probably don't envision what a building worth $125 million is.
Well, it'll be the most modern architecture and technology. In fact, the funny thing about URI and all college campuses, it'll be right next door to probably buildings that were built in the 60s or 70s, making it look like an anomaly, or those buildings look like an anomaly, the space age versus the past. But it is I've seen renderings, it's a particularly impressive building. And they're going to take down the current existing building that's woefully behind, and they're going to there's a little piece that will add to a building next door that is part of the engineering facility. They'll be able to renovate that and kind of keep that up to date.
But part of the old building is going to be demolished?
Yes, be demolished, yes, which no one will miss. No one will miss. It was already looking old in the 70s when I was there, so imagine what it looks like now.
So I imagine as other bond issues come up, that the building and construction trades is anxious to get to work and see the state do some construction. How is employment going with your members, and how important to the construction trades are these bond issues in November?
They are essential. We have gone through, and it's sad to say, and I find myself being repetitive, but the truth is the truth. We have had the worst 5 or 6 years, certainly in my lifetime, extended period of time. There's always been ups and downs in the construction trades, there always will be. But there's never been an extended period of no jobs and high unemployment as there has been for maybe the last 5 years. We've been in a lull. We've been in a deep hole here. We've lost membership, which is embarrassing to say. We've had people hanging on and working short periods of time and finding alternative jobs while trying to pay their dues and hang in the trades. So all of these, especially being passed at the same time, which might mean that they actually reach fruition at the same time. Sadly, that will probably be 2 years down the road, which my members won't be happy about, but they will work hard for it. But it's tough to say, vote it in today and wait 2 years. Let's hope the process goes a little faster. But the important thing about these bond issues altogether is that they might all hit simultaneously. We haven't had a lot of simultaneous work in Rhode Island. big projects alongside big projects alongside big projects, which puts everyone to work and sometimes helps bring people back into the workforce. So I see, along with some other things that are occurring, you know, the URI RIC nursing school and the project that's going to go there, the Bristol Vets Home that's about to start. If these things give us a little kickstart, the 195 land that will be, and we'll have to fight for every parcel there. There's nothing that will assure any of that will go union. That is private funds, private money, no prevailing wage. Yet the scale and scope of those jobs give us a good shot to get there. We will be advocating and working politically in every other way to try to get our people to work at those jobs. But if all this occurs, that for the first time there might be a light at the end of the tunnel to have some real construction activity extended and sustainable in Rhode Island for the first time in at least 5 years. I mean, it may take a year or two for us to get there, but I think the seeds are being sown right now.
I know Rhode Island hasn't done a particularly good job in supporting its public higher ed institutions, and I know in terms of operations we're on the low end, but I think it is heartening to see the state and the General Assembly committed to rebuilding buildings, renovating buildings, and then building new buildings to keep these institutions viable, popular, workable, and it's all part of our economic development, investing in our public higher education.
It's great to see, and there was extremely goodwill about this particular project. Now, if only we could work on the school moratorium. That would be a, you know, that's what we need to get lifted, the school moratorium on construction.
We'll have you back on the show to talk about that in the very near future.
Okay, thank you.
As we count backwards, we're going to skip question 3, which is the one question we want voters to say no to.
We just simply say that, thumbs down.
Vote no on the Constitutional Convention.
That's
vote
right.
no on 3. We've just got a couple of minutes left. Why don't you talk to our viewers about bond questions 1 and 2, which are related to Newport Grand.
Newport Grand is essentially turning it from slots to gaming. If so, there'll be a $40 million renovation in a building that sorely needs one. It's, to my mind, an eyesore and a building that's been really outmoded. Plus, there'll be more jobs. The UAW, United Auto Workers, represent the people inside that building. There's over 200 plus jobs there now. There'll be more jobs to come if this renovation actually occurs, if we can get this bond issue passed. So it's another important jobs bill, I think. It'll be very big construction, $40 million, but it'll also provide jobs in-house. So I really hope that we can get people on board on that one also.
And as Massachusetts moves slowly but surely towards opening their own casinos, it's not only about getting new construction jobs and new jobs at these new games, but it's also about preserving the jobs that exist there right now.
Quite literally, it may be saving that facility from extinction. You know, the worries are, in southeastern Mass, in that area, we may lose people who go there, and I don't know how long that facility, particularly the way it's operated right now, how long it could last. So we may be talking about preserving a place, preserving 250 jobs, which I think should be essential to the voting public.
Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about a lot of different bond issues, and just to recap, other than question 3, which is a vote no, you're urging Rhode Islanders to support all the other questions on the ballot, which are important bonds that move our construction industry forward, but really move our state and our economic development forward.
Yes, vote yes repeatedly, I would say, on the bond questions, with the exception of 3.
There you go. Scott Duhamel, thank you very much for giving us your time. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly and their issues right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field representative with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. This week and this month, we've been talking about a number of different issues that are appearing on the November ballot here in Rhode Island. And today we're talking about the one issue that the labor movement does not support, and that is question number 3. Joining us today is Mike Arujo. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. Chance to talk about question 3 is an opportunity I'm never going to miss.
That is terrific. And I was in attendance when the coalition that was opposing the question had their press conference at the old State House,
Right.
and you spoke. What was on your mind at that time? Why were you concerned about whether or not Rhode Island has a constitutional convention.
I mean, it's interesting, to tell you the truth. For those of us in labor, putting the rights of minorities, which can be us, those of us who work for a living, our rights to organize, our rights to have reasonable contracts, our rights to enforcement, potentially up to a public vote, is a very, very damaging thing, potentially. That's narrowly. Broadly, the coalition, what attracted me to the coalition was its diversity. Seeing groups from NAACP, NARAL, Progresso Latino, and the Rhode Island AFL-CIO participating meant that not only was this a strong coalition, this was a deep coalition that was committed to the fight for actual democracy in Rhode Island, whereas the Constitutional Convention represents in a lot of ways the opposite.
Just by way of background for the viewers, every 10 years, Rhode Islanders vote on the ballot on whether or not they want to have a constitutional convention.
Yes.
Now, we haven't had one since 1986, so about 30 years ago, voters said yes, but since then, the last 2 elections, voters have said no.
Wisely.
If it passes, then we have to elect delegates, and in this case, 1 delegate for every rep district. We have to elect 75 delegates who are going to represent the state, come together, and they could do anything they want in terms of changing the way our government
Right,
runs.
that's the myth of the Constitutional Convention, that it's this pure kind of organized Athenian view of democracy where you have a plebiscite that involves everybody, when really it's 75 unaccountable individuals who can grind any axe, discuss any agenda, and have no limits in the direction they can go. When that style of democracy shows up, the people who tend to pay the price tend to be the most vulnerable inside a community. If you leave the potential out there for people, the 75 people, who could easily organize, and it would not be that difficult, nor that expensive for them individually to do, they could decide everything from our right to organize, like I mentioned before, or the rights of our LGBT community, the rights of immigrants in the state, the rights of a woman's access to abortion. All the things that we actually hold dear, the diversity of our opinions, are at risk and suddenly thrown into contrast with these 75 people, potentially, who have whatever unaccountable agenda that they bring to the table.
And even though whatever they come up with has to go before the voters again, you know as well as I that running ballot issues is expensive, it's complicated, it's hard to inform and educate voters when they're more focused on candidates instead of ballot questions. It'd be a real challenge for any minority, whether it's a political minority or racial or an ideological minority, to protect its rights.
Absolutely. The California experience is probably the best experience for what can happen with a voter initiative gone completely awry. In a day that we should have been celebrating overcoming a historic a legacy of racism and backwardsness in this country by electing Barack Obama, that same election restricted the rights on the gay community to marry. So you saw on the one hand an expansion of one aspect of our democracy, a true expression of our democracy, and then you saw a majority, not even real majority, coming out and holding back the rights of an individual and a couple to express their own love. Now, for us to take that kind of risk, not only is damaging and dangerous, it could lead us down to a road that says, if this is effective, and if this is the path that we really want to lead, then what's to prevent black people from going to the back of the bus again? What's to prevent women from losing full franchise? What's to prevent our moving forward? We have a process that's democratic in the state, and we have a good process, and we wisely passed and forewent a constitutional convention the last two go-arounds. We should definitely do it again. 1986 was a miserable failure. The penalty that was paid by women and the divisiveness of that campaign left scars in the state that we still feel today. It goes against the principles of unity. It goes against the principles of democracy, as far as I'm concerned. It's the pretense that bothers me the most about it, I think.
Well, I know there's some advocates who are unhappy with the state of the state. They're unhappy with what the General Assembly has done or failed to do. and they see this constitutional convention as a panacea, as a cure-all.
Of course you do. I mean, there's no arguing the perceived logic of doing this. I mean, you're opening up difficult questions to the public, and that feels right. It sounds like America in a lot of ways, but it's not. We're a tempered democracy, one that appreciates the values of the majority all the time. In fact, we live in a majority world, but also finds the rights of minorities sacred in a way that is unique in the rest of the world. So though we feel today, that person may feel that this is the right choice and a real balm for a state that may be dysfunctional, which I would debate, that only means that they're on the right side of the majority today. Tomorrow they could find themselves in a position where they might find themselves in the minority, in which case they might see a different version of the way democracy looks, one that's possibly from the outside or one from underneath. And that is something that people usually don't see when they support this.
You rightly point out the California example of what could happen when rights are put on the ballot. And I find it ironic that so soon after this state passed a marriage equality law, voters are going to be able to possibly create a process that could eliminate those rights.
Repeal those rights. And also, what's the limit? Where do you draw the line on those rights? I don't think it's coincidental. Now, I'm not a person that believes in conspiracies whatsoever, but I do believe that organizations and people act in their own interest. There is an interest in this country that is opposed, angrily often, to equal rights for the LGBT community. They are organized, they are coherent, and they're wealthy. And in California, you saw Utah, millionaires and billionaires in Utah, pour billions of dollars, well, tens of millions of dollars, into this California ballot initiative to repeal the rights of the gay community to marry. Now, a state like Rhode Island, which is nowhere near the scope of California, means not only could a person who doesn't accept the rights of somebody else get more value for their dollar than they would in California, their dollar would go a lot further. It leaves us open to the risk of having out-of-state, unattached, and unaccountable interests pour money into a campaign that honestly the threshold for winning is very, very low. If that happens, then we are no longer really Rhode Island. Then we're really just the ideological colony of some foreign thought process that's not native to us or to our community. It goes against, like I said before, our spirit of democracy in Rhode Island.
Elsewhere in this country, workers have seen their rights eroded in the last few years. We've seen the emergence of a right-to-work law in a state like Michigan, which birthed the United Auto Workers. You saw an attempt in Ohio that was unsuccessful, but a successful attempt in Wisconsin of restricting bargaining rights of all public sector workers. Could those kinds of struggles find themselves here?
Absolutely, and I would be willing to bet that you will. The rolling back the rights of workers to negotiate their own contracts and to be a democratic voice inside the economic sphere is one that has been a thorn of the side of, I'm trying to put this gently, of bosses who have less than generous intentions for their workers. They have organized campaigns, and I think the birth of the right to work was at the height of the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King pointed out very, very aptly that it was right to work for less. That not only did it rob workers of the right to organize, it meant that the workers who stayed and did try to organize had to split their efforts with less and less resource, between negotiating contracts and consistently organizing their workplaces. This is an untenable situation for people. And also a collective right, of which in the United States is rare, that is so valuable and so vital to the interests of working people and to everybody, that to do anything to erode it is to really undermine the fabric of the middle class and working class growth and social mobility in this country. It's a sacred right, and it's one that really, honestly, I believe should be enshrined constitutionally. That's I would have a convention for, but that would be a national convention. This is not something that should be taken lightly. I know it's an off-year election, and turnout tends to be low in these elections, which is something that the forces that believe in abrogating rights and believe in scaling back the ability of our citizens to express themselves freely count on low turnout, and they count on a misinformed public. Things like right to work sound great. Things like employee choice sound great. Things like school choice sound great in theory, but then the reality is much uglier and much more painful and much harder to undo. A right taken away is a much harder thing to come back, and one that takes so much effort that it's just, it would be devastating to the long-term health of the state and indeed the way our democracy functions. I mean, we would have to redo our concepts of democracy if this goes through. We would have to go back to a way where we're organizing for our basic freedoms one more time. And I don't know that we're all prepared for that right now. I'd rather avoid the issue.
And there's a group of people that have come together, coalesced together, to urge people to reject number 3.
Absolutely.
The Citizens for Responsible Government is the name of the coalition, but reject number 3 is, reject question 3 is the theme that they're
right. Reject number 3. It's again, and this was pointed, I believe you actually pointed this out, that in description, the Constitutional Convention is an easy sell because it's a short, catchy explanation, and one that serves the purpose of people who depend on ignorance for voting. Our position of rejecting number 3 is a much more nuanced and complicated position, like a democracy should be, where you have many interests, each one acting in their own accord, thinking about the larger body, but it's nuanced. You have to make room for people, and you have to make room for compromise. Rejecting 3 allows that room. Allowing 3 to pass, if it should pass, would circumvent our ability to interact with each other directly.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.